I guess in the beginning, we just tried to kind of positively push her a little bit and try to get her there. But that gradually, during that semester, got worse. We ended up in a situation where she hardly went to school at all. I want to use the word depressed, but I guess we didn't understand back then. We just thought, okay, so it's about that. So let's try to work with that and try to push her. But at some point during that period, we realized, okay, there's actually something else. She's not well mentally, for real.
So that sentence really hit me hard as a parent, I think, because instinctively I felt that I probably would have done exactly the same. And that me also as an ADHD diagnosed person often tried to fit into a norm that maybe never really was mine. And that moment really, really stayed with me because I think in many parts, parents recognize themselves in that, trying to push their children towards what we believe is normal. And that is why we are talking about it today. This is why I'm doing the podcast, essentially. During this conversation, there was a moment that completely changed how I think about diagnosis and neurodiversity. Welcome to another episode of This is Mental. I'm Pascal, and today I'm speaking with Linus, a father navigating life with a neurodivergent child, a daughter. And just to manage expectation, in this episode we're not talking about labels or textbooks. We are not diving deep into medical definitions. We are talking about real experience, the instinct to push actually someone into a norm, and how a diagnosis actually can shift everything, and why sharing that information, especially early, can actually be a gift. Because when a brain works differently from the norm, the real question becomes, are we trying to fix the person or are we trying to understand the person? Essentially, what we are doing today is sharing what we've learned, how we reflect on what we've done, and how we see things differently now. If you have ever questioned what normal really means, or felt that you were slightly off compared to others, this episode might actually be for you. Welcome, Linus, to our second interview. We actually already tried that, and we were meeting in Stockholm, and unfortunately my laptop actually crashed and we lost the whole recording. So this is the second go. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Pascal. I appreciate that you're having me, and let's go for the second try.
Exactly. So we're actually doing this over web. Even though I'm in Sweden, I'm a couple of 100 kilometers away from you. I'm in the south of Sweden. You're slightly north of Stockholm, correct?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
But let's dive right into this. So the topic of today is and was always kind of talking about neurodiversity, and having kind of two distinct perspectives. One from a father, and that is you, a father of not mine, obviously. But father of a daughter who has neurodiversity diagnosis, and then me on the other hand, as a son, actually just find out, what is it, kind of 9 months, 12 months ago, that I actually also have, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So extremely late, close to 50, and the discussion is really about the personal experiences out of that. So there's not scientific facts that we're sharing today. I will follow up with that later. But first of all, Linus, let's introduce you to the listeners out there. Who are you?
Who am I? I guess I'm 50 years old. I'm married with 3 kids now. The 2 oldest ones are actually adults as of some month ago, while the youngest one is 12, and that's the one we're talking about today. Living in Stockholm, working in recruitment, specifically for the life science industry, where I've worked some 20 or so years. Some of the listeners might recognize me from Instagram as well, with kind of another completely other topic,
Yes.
more of a passion project in classical menswear.
Which shows, obviously.
No, you mean I've got clothes on? Yeah,
No, no, but I mean, you're a nice turtleneck, a really nice jacket. I really like, and properly arranged
thank you. The pocket square. Yeah,
pocket square,
yeah.
exactly.
Thank you, Pascal. You look well as well. So cheers.
A little bit more relaxed. So you already kind of mentioned that. So you have three kids, and I think it's also quite. You are super sporty as well, in my terms at least. That has also to do with your wife, correct? Who is
Yeah, yeah. I guess my wife has. I'm not sure if she's got such a big part in that really, but it's
okay.
definitely a good fit because she works. She's into research in exercise physiology at the Karolinska
Mm.
Institute. So
That
uh,
didn't help. So you were sporty before.
yeah, I've always been, sport has been a huge part of my life ever since I was a kid. I did
Okay.
multiple sports, tried to go like on elite level in a few of them until fairly late.
Okay.
And then nowadays it's more of a fun and health perspective on it.
Okay. That sounds terrific. But I mean, it sounds and it looks like you have your kind of life really well covered, right?
I guess that's probably what it looks like, but then you're
Exactly.
only seeing the surface, and then but
Yes.
you also know what's underneath that surface.
Yes. Yes.
But I guess
Exactly.
many just see the kind of the outside of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean especially the Instagram obviously is a little bit biased in that, and people can't really see beyond that where they actually should and be aware of that. But that's a
Yeah.
completely different story. So we wanted to talk about neurodiversity, right? And then you already indicated that your daughter is actually has been diagnosed with autism some time ago. So I wanted to kind of dive first a little bit into the whole process. How did you find out, and what was the process to actually get the diagnosis? Because I think there's a lot of to be learned from that as such, and then dig a little bit deeper. So, but I mean, how did you actually find out?
Yeah, and thanks for asking. And I think this you said there's probably a lot to learn from it. That's the whole reason why I'm agreeing to do this because
Mm,
I'm now being much more personal and private,
mm, mm,
foremost private than I usually am in a public setting. I can be personal but never private. But so this is really the
mm,
exception, and that exception to me is really important because if someone can take away something from this conversation and be better equipped or prepared, whatever, for their situation, it's all worth it. But from our perspective, as you said, our daughter was diagnosed a year ago now with autism, the kind of the you typically describe as high functioning autism. So, as the psychiatrist said, in the feedback session with her, you're extremely smart. You just have a difficulty with people.
mm,
So that's something we learned a year ago, but the journey to get there was kind of long, and it started probably three years ago. When she got from being in a the first grades, she was in a kind of a small school and a fairly controlled setting to going into a much larger school in fourth grade. And during that summer, autumn, she started to show a lot of anxiety and not
mm.
wanting to go to school. I guess in the beginning, we just tried to kind of positively push her a little bit and try to get her there. But that gradually during that semester got worse, and also getting into the next semester, we ended up in a situation where she hardly went to school at all. You could start to see that she was kind of I want to use the word depressed, but I guess we
Mhm.
didn't understand back then because we thought it was just connected to like changing school to a larger environment where there's not a completely calm setting in the classroom, some challenges there and so on. So we just thought, okay, so it's about that. So let's try to work with that and try to push her. But at some point during that period, we realized, okay, there's actually something else. She's not well mentally, for real.
Let's pause there for a second. I think many parents recognize that instinct. When something becomes difficult for a child, we try to encourage, to push them a little, help them overcome it. But sometimes the problem isn't motivation at all. Sometimes something deeper is going on.
And that was kind of the turning point where we started. I don't remember what came first, but the school was kind of slow at picking this up, and it's amazing how much time out of school she had before someone even reacted. Wow. Which in hindsight is I'm a bit baffled about how they didn't react sooner and more. But once we got her to see a nurse and a psychologist also in primary care, they found out that she was really not feeling very well, kind of depressed, a lot of anxiety. She also got into hurting herself, and that became gradually worse, as was anxiety, as was depression. So we ended up, after some time, it was pretty much like all she wanted to do was to lay in her room, completely dark, on her side, feeling that she didn't want to live anymore. Cutting herself, having a lot of anxiety, very depressed, suicidal thoughts on a daily basis.
Wow.
Sorry for diving into the deep end right away.
Yeah, I think the topic as such has it in it, right? And I think that's exactly one of the reasons why we talk about that, because that neurodiversity can hide itself quite a bit.
Yeah,
exactly, with the things that you have just mentioned.
Yeah, because you talk about neurodiversity, that wasn't kind of being discussed in this phase at all. We had it up for, like, would it make sense to have her assessed? But then everything pointed in the other direction, and the school nurse and the school doctor said, no, not really. There's nothing indicating that. There's even a tendency of over-diagnosing girls nowadays. It's increasing a lot. So it was more a matter of taking care of the acute things like the suicidal thoughts and hurting yourself. What can be done in the school setting as of today to make her feel a little bit better to come to school?
Work more on adaptation concepts than actually going to the ground in the essence, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes, making her work. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have that specific support. I don't know what the English term for it would be, but there's a kind of a separate setting from the school system and from the healthcare system that specifically targets children that needs extra support, whether it's from a psychology point of view or otherwise. Their burden is quite high right now in Sweden, so it took a lot of time to get into that system as well. So she gradually got worse during that period, and we eventually got our foot in due to the fact there was a kind of an acute situation where basically in our first conversation with the nurse there, because he talked with her, he talked with us together, but he also talked with us as parents separately after talking to her. And the first thing he said was, okay, the first thing you do when you get home, remove all razor blades. That's kind of tough to hear as a parent. Then you realize the level, and I can feel it just mentioning it. At the same time as they say that, they judged her. Okay, so she has these suicidal thoughts. She's hurting herself, but I don't think she will kill herself right now. So you're not top priority. You're priority, but not top priority. So yes, you have to wait in line until you have a chance to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or even a doctor. So we were kind of stuck waiting, and she just gradually got worse. So at some point we felt that, okay, so we don't dare to wait any longer, because then there might not be anyone to take care of at all. And it feels very strange to say that about your daughter, but that was the situation we were in. So we went private, got her to a psychologist that we got recommended, seeing a psychiatrist as well. We ordered an assessment, neurodiversity assessment. This is then a little bit more than a year ago, and then that ended up in her being diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, autism, this well-functioning autism, and eating disorder. So we're kind of that's what we're fighting right now. And when I say fighting, it's so you have three of those are kind of diseases, while as one is a diagnosis. It's not something that goes away. It's about finding ways to deal with it.
So the process was basically, I mean, kind of initiated to you going private, not kind of being able to rely on the public
Yeah,
healthcare system,
yeah. We could have
which
waited,
is.
and if we would have been lucky, she would still have been alive when they had time for her. But we didn't want to take that chance.
This is where something really, really interesting happens, because many parents fear diagnosis because they think it creates a label, but very often it actually creates something else, understanding. Now, so the process was super difficult to actually get this diagnosis, but now after that, getting that diagnosis, do you get now support, and what kind of support do you get, and your daughter?
Yeah, so we get support. Feels really good to be able to with the diagnosis get access to other type of support, whether that is at a level where we're all happy, or if there's more to be done, that's a different story. But just getting the diagnosis, also from not just getting the support, but to have an understanding, I think. And I should say I have my daughter's approval to have this discussion, because that's really important to me. But she concluded, after having the diagnosis explained to her, that it felt really good to learn this, because that helped her understand herself, to understand why she has been feeling this way for all these years. Even when she was a very little child, she felt that there was, I don't know if she realized then that she felt different, but she's felt this all the time, and it's been really tough, but she hasn't been able to put words on it. But then now it gives her a better understanding of herself. It also gives us a lot of better understanding for how she functions, what she needs, and how we can support that. And part of that is making sure we educate ourselves on how to do that in the best way. And that's where the support system also kicks in with education from the specific autism team in the region and so on.
And this is actually now the moment that I mentioned earlier, the idea that the diagnosis might actually feel like a burden to parents, but in real life, it's actually a relief to the child. Now, in hindsight, I mean, it's I think that I can relate to that feeling of her, probably, that she's feeling that something is off, but probably not being able to put the finger on it, because you can't. I mean, you don't go there, and especially if you are that young, but you kind of have the feeling that something is off, that you're different.
Yeah.
And I think that's clear. So, but in terms of now in the current situation, so. And in our first discussions, we were actually talking about that as well.
in being open about this towards your child, right?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
there's
yeah,
also doing, and I think there's even today probably hesitation of parents to actually do to proper tests, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
get a diagnosis because they feel then stigmatized or are
yeah,
afraid of that.
yeah. No, I totally agree, and I guess both you and I have seen that a lot around us. People, parents that hesitate to see their kids with the eyes, with objective eyes, kind of.
Mm,
They don't see what the rest of us see, and how they would benefit from um, maybe getting diagnosed, and getting access to that support system, getting the understanding from their environment of how their brain works, to be able to support them in the best way possible. And
mm,
that's so sad. And you see that over and over again around you. Going back to what you said about telling your child, there's in Stockholm where we live, there's, in order to get access to this autism support structure, you need to go through a mandatory training for parents,
mm,
as a kind of starting point, which I think is great, because then everyone has the same baseline in terms of knowledge and in terms of understanding for how the system works. In that training, you sit with a whole classroom of other parents that are in the same situation, and they asked specifically, the trainer asked in one of the later sessions, would you tell your child, and why not? And there, most of the parents said, yeah, definitely. But I remember one mom sitting next to me, she said, no, I wouldn't. And then the question was, why? No, because I feel that he would use that against me, kind of saying, no, I had this diagnosis, that's why I can't do this and that. So that was her way of looking at it. Then another mom sitting on my other side said, okay, so I need to give my opinion here. And she said, my mom never told me that I had this diagnosis.
mm,
And the only way she found out was when her own child, at the age of 5, was diagnosed. So then her mother said, yeah, that makes sense because you also have it. And she says, what?
wow.
And she was like 42 or something.
Mm,
Why didn't you tell me?
mm,
And the even more interesting thing was her sister was diagnosed at a young age, and they were kind of dealing with that, but they never told her.
mm,
So she's been going through like 40 years of her life, feeling different, not feeling well at all. And she said, if someone just had told me, I would
mm,
have felt so much better during all these years. So I would never, ever, ever not tell my kid.
mm.
And that kind of ended that discussion.
And this is where our stories actually connect. Linus experienced this as a father, trying to understand his child, and I experienced something similar from the other side. Discovering at 48 my own brain also works differently.
My older brother was early diagnosed with ADHD, and I was showing clearly signs as well. He's 6 years older, and that was kind of like he was the kind of the trouble kid a little bit, right? So he was the one with the problems and the issues, and I was much more adapted because of that, and that is actually so I mean, yeah, I wasn't 42, I was 48 when I was now diagnosed after. I think my journey in overall is not that bad at all, right? So it's okay where I am, and I'm quite happy with that. But I mean, obviously, you have struggles along the way, which if you had that kind of understanding, would have made the whole thing so much easier and clearer. But my parents actually never even thought about it, that I could have it. That
They
was the
they
weird thing.
never
No,
consider it.
no. And the even worse part is my mother was for some time working in psychiatric hospitals, doing therapy with patients and everything, and she never had a blink of an idea that I could have that, or at least she never spoke out to me about that, which makes the whole thing a little bit more difficult to digest, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's a little bit the shoemaker's children's shoes. You kind of might be harder to see it when it's close, or you're very biased, or you don't want to think this way. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, so
Sorry,
that's
now
open.
I'm
That's
starting to
actually
ask
no.
questions. So
No worries, no worries. I mean, that is actually opening up a whole new discussion, kind of, which I'm intend to talk about in a different podcast, to be
okay,
completely. No,
let's leave
but
that.
the thing is that I think my mother was narcissistic, so she was never really kind of too much care, kind of looking at me as that, as long as I was doing what she wanted me, or she intended me to do, and that I kind of was bringing her what she needed, that was all fine. She was
Okay.
not really kind of, and I think that's but nevertheless, I mean, it's that I really therefore I can so relate to that kind of, that this is tell the child, because the child is feeling it anyway.
Yeah,
But if you can
that was my
actually,
question. What did you feel?
I knew that. I mean, I knew that I was weird, a little bit weirder in lots of aspects, and and now we kind of that's another kind of topic we I wanted to talk about shortly. Is also, so I was always kind of in school, early school. I was always the one who was kind of the class clown, right? I was always kind of entertaining. I was making fun. Was making jokes. I always had to go outside the classroom to cool down, as they call it, right? So that was me all through the first 6 years of school. And then later on, I was always kind of like, okay, super complex things I could deal with, kind of standard things, regular, I couldn't care less. So I was really bad at that. Repetition was the worst. And I mean, we had, in Switzerland, you do apprenticeships, which is
Yeah,
a combination of working on the job and then school education. And even there, we had feedback talks exactly stating the same thing. So you see, super focused on super complex things, but he can't kind of deal with standardized, kind of repetitive tasks. And I mean, it's just kind of like, just kind of, and you know, if you think about that, that should be really kind of clear indicators that you need to be looking at something
yeah,
in hindsight, which we never did. But I mean, all these kind of things make you feel weird, because it's kind of like, why can't I concentrate like others can, right? Why can I? I had to, yeah. I mean, it makes it super difficult to also explain a little bit,
yeah,
to be honest, right? Because it's kind of, now if I'm talking, I was the class clown, right? And you will always have people who say, I was also funny in school.
yeah,
Or if someone is saying, then it's kind of, so, yeah, probably everybody is a little bit on the spectrum, as they would call it, which is not really the case, right? It's a clear distinction there, because your brain is really functioning differently. But it's difficult to explain how I felt through that period of time. But you feel you're different, and you have this. I had this repetitive feedback throughout my time until now, almost 50.
as you said, you had that feeling, but it's hard to put words on it.
Mm.
I guess, but if I just compare with my daughter, as I said, she felt really good with getting the diagnosis, and before
Mm.
that, when we're starting the assessment, and before knowing the diagnosis, we talked about it with her kind of expectations and what she felt, and she said, well, I don't know what it is, but it's something. I know that. So she was just fine with going through it, whatever it was. Hearing your story, what I could have done differently, I guess it's not like you don't want to see stuff, but I think you have a lot of times, or at least I probably had very normative eyes on things. When I mean earlier in her younger years, I saw her high performance and feeling at the same time insecure and having very high demands on herself. I felt kind of I want to protect her from being that good girl, kind of that very top performing girl that ends up with a lot of anxiety and pressure on herself rather than from the environment. That's what I saw, but I didn't really connect the dots with the rest of it. And of course you feel bad that you didn't recognize the pattern sooner. But I guess we did what we could. But once you open Pandora's box and you see things with different eyes and more of a diverse thinking, then things make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the normative kind of eyes, right? That we as a, I mean, that's a little bit more kind of a society problem, right? Or issue that you kind of like the way you react to kind of issues with motivation and let's come on, let's do this, and you can achieve this instead of like more maybe with a much softer approach sometimes. But I think it's difficult. I mean, in your situation, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, how you can be. What could you have done differently? I mean, it's a difficult question, right? So from the system, I understand the system was slow, extremely slow, but it sounds like now it's actually it's actually good, right? It works well, relatively speaking.
We still have huge challenges and we're still in the face of suicidal thoughts and eating disorder that we fight every day. But yeah, the system has kind of kicked in and we're in that loop. The big challenge was that it took such a long time and a lot of efforts and initiatives from parents that in our case were very fortunate because we could afford that private assessment. Not everyone can, which is not fair. And if everything goes wrong, you have children dying because they don't get the support they need in time, and we just can't have that.
No, especially in a country as Sweden, where you would claim that they have such a high qualified system and
we really do.
Equality.
So it's not like it's a crappy system in general, but this is a gap that needs to be addressed.
So how does your daily life now look? How is your daily life now? Now you have the diagnosis. You just said that there's still ongoing issues, obviously, and that will not kind of go away that fast because it's kind of has built up over years. But how are you dealing with it now at the moment?
Now, I guess how we deal with the diagnosis and how we're kind of adjusting the way we live and act is that's more of the permanent approach. The other conditions are something we fight along the way that hopefully becomes better. But with the autism now, she's in a special school. We live in one of the suburbs outside of Stockholm. This is unfortunately not in our suburb, but in another one. So we need to get her there. But we were very lucky to get her into that school, a great one with only NPF students with might be autism, might be ADHD, might be something else, or a combination. That has helped her a lot. Now she's actually in school, which we went from the first week of the fall semester was the first time in almost 2 years that she was in school for a full week. Even though
Wow.
that was an introductory week, so shorter days,
Yeah,
but still, that was the first week in almost 2 years. So only that was a huge progression. So she's in school Monday, Tuesday, and then have a resting day, recovering on Wednesdays, because we together with the school, we've realized that her energy doesn't last for 5 consecutive
no.
days. So she's having that Wednesday to recover, because it takes a lot of energy, even if it's a special setting, much more suited for her diagnosis. But still, it takes a lot of energy. So Monday, Tuesday in school, Wednesday at home, Thursday, Friday in school. We drive her there, pick her up every day. So it means adjusting the way we work. Currently, also with the eating disorder, it requires us to sit with her when she's eating, put her food on the plate, so she doesn't have to make those decisions herself. And we've realized that that's tough with the lunch in school, so we all also go there now during lunch to sit with her. So of course, stuff like that affects how you deal with work life and so on. But also very much kind of strict routines at home. We do specific things after dinner. We do this, and then we do this, and we end by doing this before we go to bed. And the routine for going to bed is this and that. She even has kind of lists that can support her in the evening and in the mornings. Also, what you learn from these training sessions or reading up on the diagnosis, having a good planned agenda, and where she is aware of what's going to happen and why and when and with whom ahead of time, helps her kind of digest and kind of saves her energy as well. So having late change of plans or something less structured or unclear, that stresses her up. So of course that also becomes an important aspect of how we kind of live our lives. But at the end of the day, it's all about finding ways that works for her and makes her feel as good as possible. Because priorities are very simple. That's the number one priority.
Yes.
Nothing else matters really.
No.
Because she said at some point, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing all of this, and not for my sake." And I said, I couldn't care less. I could live in a tent in the middle of the forest, eating grass, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you feel well. That's the only thing that matters.
One of the biggest things I personally learned after my ADHD diagnosis was something surprisingly simple. It's not about intelligence, it's not about capacity, it's about energy.
Yeah, I think it's also quite interesting what you're actually saying, and that resonates extremely well with me with the energy part.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the things that I never understood, and that is now really, again, quite specific to me. I don't know if anybody else recognized that with ADHD now specifically, but for me, if I'm in interaction, human interaction, in any kind of, I'm in sales in my business life, that takes a lot of energy. And and probably if someone meets me, would never even guess that it actually that's quite natural, and it feels kind of like, yeah, that's just the way it is. But I also need a lot of recuperation time because I'm really exhausted after these kind of things. And I have always had colleagues who could, they were clients and doing projects, and they were kind of just continuously going and going, and I didn't understand. I really didn't understand how the heck could they actually do that. And then I had some explanation for me that, okay, I'm just kind of intense and enthusiastic, and that is kind of using my energy. But the aspect of this neurodiversity, kind of this diagnosis, made me actually understand that had nothing to do with my enthusiasm or anything like that, but just basically because I'm working differently, and if I have to be in explicit situation, sales situation, this kind of things, that my kind of like energy levels are dropping faster than any and than other people's. As simple as
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And I guess that you just said it, that people would never guess, because they just, again, we touched upon it in the beginning. There's a certain surface that people see. They don't see what's behind it, and they just see this energetic guy that is good in sales and is networking and doing that well. They have no clue what's going on inside,
No,
and how
no.
you get completely drained.
Yeah, exactly. What is the cost of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Of being exactly that kind of person. But it's also interesting. I mean, it's very promising, right? That you now have tools at hand to actually help her and getting into that. Despite of it, I mean, I think as you said, I mean, there's no question if you know doing these kind of things and adjusting your daily work life to actually help with that. I mean, that's clear from the just children make your priorities, right? You will offer anything for them,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially. But it's so in I know it's probably difficult because you're still kind of in the midst of it. But I mean, looking forward, you know, in terms of future, and I mean, she's 12 now. I have a 12-year-old son as well, and in Switzerland, you actually start talking now very soon about what kind of jobs or school are you going, what are your plans, and you know your future kind of life. How do you see that? I mean, is that even a topic for you, or have you been thinking about that?
It's really not. Going back to what we said about like priorities, the number one priority is her feeling as good as possible here and now. And then there will be a longer perspective on things for sure, but we're not there at the moment. We also know that looking at the longer perspective to some extent has, from her own side, has put pressure on herself,
Mm,
creating even more anxiety and so on. So we're really not dealing with that at all.
no.
Rather, if anything, talking about like opportunities, what you can do with this way of functioning, and how your brain
Mm,
works, and the strength in that, and what you could do with that, and so on, kind of lifting that every now and then, not in a structured way, but getting into that there's not just limitations, but there's actually
mm,
opportunities with it. It's
mm,
about finding your environment and what triggers you. But we'll get there. But right now, it's very much here now, dealing with
mm, mm,
just doing everything we can to make her feel
mm,
as good as possible, and adjusting in the current situation.
mm. I mean, for me, kind of like now, I'm also reflecting on that and thinking how kind of has my career, if you call it a
Yeah,
career, has developed, and also questioning, especially about why I'm doing what I'm doing.
yeah,
Uh, and the interesting thing is, I think, I mean, though I was not aware of my diagnosis, I have actually now created a work setting which I probably operate quite well. And because I'm as a sales, I'm not permanently out there and pitching and doing things. I also have to, you know, you have to do your homework. I also know I'm not doing this on 100% level. I'm keeping myself some time left for exactly doing a podcast like this, but also to kind of dive into photography and other kind of a little bit more creative projects, which I noticed I really need, and that actually evolved quite naturally. Not necessarily in a soft way, to be honest. And that is also something I was reflecting back on okay, no, realized that this probably was also part of this diagnosis that I had always kind of in a repetitive way kind of crashes. There was depression as well. I mean, depression, burnouts. I was, my recuperation time when I had, for example, I had a disc hernia, and it took for me more than 3 months until I actually was back at work, just because I was crashing that hard, not kind of taking care of my balance, energy levels wise. And I had that in kind of like 2 years, probably you could set the time for that. And I have kind of through that process, I was actually learning, right, what I need to adjust and adapt to find some kind of a setting that works. And I have been in that setting at the moment for probably 2 years now, and I haven't felt better in that context, but it's still not easy. I mean, it's not something that is going away. You still have your daily struggles, which is just part of that story. An interesting thing is also all with this. We thought you touched upon that also, that the kind of the abilities that you have
Yeah.
because of your diagnosis, because you will think differently. That's also quite interesting. And there's obviously some talks, and there's other YouTube channels that talk about superpowers and all that things. And I don't like that too much because it doesn't feel like a superpower, because that makes actually that you are different and feel weird, and that you are not kind of you notice that you're not in the same kind of, you're not thinking along the way others do, and that makes that's a special thing. I need to send you actually also a picture. Down in my summer house, I have a saying, a big poster from an American artist who wrote, "Whatever makes you weird as a kid is your greatest strength in life," or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I like a lot, because it's probably going to be a strength, yes, but it's not a superpower and as such, but it's something you can actually utilize and
Yeah.
profit from.
Yeah.
How-
And I think talking about superpowers and all of that you just described is kind of, you compare with the neurotypical, which
Mm,
is kind of a problem in itself, because with you say that, yeah, your brain works differently from the neurotypical. Well, it
yes.
might be that the neurotypical works differently from your brain. We have just, as a society, defined something as normal, while
Mm,
there's a variety, and our brains work differently. There's
mm,
nothing normal and unnormal. It might be that the majority has this way of their brains work this way, but there's a saying that just because the Chinese are many, it doesn't mean that it's right to eat with chopsticks. Uh,
mm.
and I'm not judging chopsticks in the country. It's just an expression, but it's
Yes.
really it's just about numbers, really.
Mm.
And this leads to a bigger question, honestly. If brains naturally work differently, why do we define schools and workplaces as if there was only one normal way of functioning?
So how do you think that society as such, right? So that the environment can actually help. I mean, I saw just recently on LinkedIn from one of the bigger consultancy companies talking about that they are hiring now diverse people, right?
Yeah.
And I was laughing about it because I mean it's like, okay, yeah, but with a PhD only, right?
Oh yeah.
And a
Yeah.
master, and it's like that's kind of a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, how do we have to change, or what do you think has to change?
I think, and going back to the beginning where we concluded that I work in recruitment, we as recruiters have a huge responsibility. Whenever I help a company recruit for a function, it's always about competence,
Mm,
competence and potential. It's not about experience. It's not about looking or functioning or whatever it is, exactly like the manager that is recruiting you, which is quite often the case. It's about looking at competence, and for a specific job, there might be actually a requirement for your brain to function this non-neurotypical way to perform well. So it's about finding those settings where not only you perform well, but also feel well. And I think it's a responsibility for us, but also as a society, we need to think about these things in general. I know this Swedish consultancy firm that they're in IT and specific type of roles where they actually only hire autistic people for these consultancy jobs, because it really fits the competence of that work. And I think it's beautiful, and it's for real, and it's not just one of these greenwashing things that you say.
No, exactly,
But it's for real.
Exactly. So it actually has really kind of a proper reasoning, and it's creating money, it's creating value by using and utilizing those kind of people. Yes, yeah. And actually, I add value to the companies I work as well. So, in my kind of sometimes a little bit weird approach, but nevertheless,
having seen you in action in that capacity, I can only confirm.
Thank you very much.
So let's make this practical for a moment.
What I would like to kind of end this session a little bit is what you would give for advice for a parent if they're not entirely sure, they're thinking about maybe should we do an investigation or not, should we do the testing, a proper testing, and as a starting point, right? What would be the advice that you could give?
Yeah, I guess my advice, and it's difficult. I don't have all the answers, but I would try to keep an open mind. I would try to listen in on the child, because sometimes we just do this and we're kind of doing what we've always done and what is expected of us and so on. And then you realize too late. So trying to listen in and be open about it, and don't hesitate to use the support around you. Don't be afraid of a diagnosis. It's actually the best thing that can happen, because then you understand things so much better and can deal with it, because it's again, it's not a disease. It's something you will live with for the rest of your life, because that's how your brain functions. So what could be better than to learn how your brain functions? It's good for all of us, regardless of diagnosis.
Yes. But I think what for me now was really kind of helping, actually, because I think the getting a diagnosis also helps you to actually find out that you're not the only one, because at some point you always feel you're quite unique and nobody is exactly like me. I'm some special, or as a parent, like nobody else has this problem. And then you actually, if you have that kind of let's say kind of diagnosis, then you can actually see and find people who you were not aware of, or that you have actually this kind of, okay, those have exactly the same kind of issues. Oh, how did they approach that? And you can actually learn from that, right?
No, I totally agree. And that's kind of connects to another important topic. Talk about it. Don't hesitate to talk about it. Realizing that you're not the only one, learning from others, being inspired by others, whatever. That's great. Yeah.
And for example, YouTube it can be sometimes a strange, and sometimes also a little bit be a wasteful platform, time wise. But obviously there is a lot of helpful content as well, where you can actually listen into and just for the sake, not necessarily there is not always specialists behind it, but I mean just learning from other personal experience can actually help. I think at least it did for me. And to kind of the final, what are you kind of what are you working on yourself, and what are the next things that you kind of, in terms of this kind of diagnosis, what is your kind of goals that you want to kind of focus on? Have you thought about that? Beside actually talking to me, which I extremely appreciate, because it's kind of, yeah, it's putting you out there, right? Which is not
Yeah, it does, and it's something I never do normally, being this private in public, which may say something about myself. So I'm
mm,
during this process with my daughter, I'm also learning a lot more about myself.
mm,
Maybe putting things into perspective as well, and also things become very clear on what I need to be able to support her. I need to not fall apart. So I need
mm,
to make sure I function, and to be able to keep up with this, because yes, we have it running, but it's not easy, and it's
no,
as you know, it's something you live with, and you have to deal with it, and priorities are simple, but that doesn't mean that you run out of energy yourself or whatever. So to me, and it is probably not new, because I've had it in my life all the time, but being active with sports and exercise really is my way of kind of getting some steam out, and getting energy from a completely different setting, being physical. Now, before we did this, I started in the morning with a 15K run, with some
wow,
friends in a beautiful trail environment in the archipelago. To some, that sounds very strange and exhausting. To me, gives me a lot of energy to
mm,
make it through the day. So
mm,
I also understanding what I need to be able to support her as well
mm,
is important
mm,
to me. That total picture.
yes.
But I'm definitely learning things about myself along the way.
Yeah, I think that's actually taking be aware what you actually self need. I think that's independent of whatever kind of diagnosis is probably a
Yeah,
key
yeah.
thing. To be aware, to learn, and then kind of nurture that yourself, that you actually keep the balance, whatever kind of, however that looks like. Linus, it was a fantastic pleasure to have you on this podcast. Thank you very, very much for being so open and for sharing. And
Thank I feel honored and grateful to be invited, and I think it's a hugely important topic. So let's
absolutely.
let's let's keep discussing in a podcast format, or just with the friends around us, right?
Yes, let's do that. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Before we finish, there are three things that I really want you to leave with from this conversation. The first, I think it's really important to listen carefully to your children. Often they feel that something is different before anyone else actually understands it. Then secondly, don't fear the diagnosis. A diagnosis is not a limitation, it's information, and it actually can be really freeing as well. And third, talk about it quite openly, because the moment we all together start talking openly about a diagnosis, about neurodiversity, we realize we're actually not alone, and you get much more understanding out of it. And different minds essentially exist everywhere, and understanding how they actually work can change everything. So thank you very much for listening to This Is Mental.